like the new microphone. They're better than the old ones. I'm happy that you brought them to this. Exactly.
พี่สวัสดีค่ะสวัสดีค่ะ
ไม่รู้ว่านี่พี่ก็เป็นพิธีกรเป็นผู้ชายแต่พี่ก็มาจองตรงนี้
อ๋อ
You should tell them to move forward, you know.
So we're going to start soon, so if you want, you can feel free to come up to the tables in front. Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today for the launch of the latest synthetic drug report for East and Southeast Asia. Today we have viewers here at FCCT with us and also some viewers who are watching live on Facebook. So as a brief introduction, today here with me from UNODC, we have Mr. Benedict Hoffman, the UNODC Acting Regional Representative for Southeast Asia and the Pacific, Mr. Inshik Sim, the illicit drugs analyst on drugs and organized crime. And we also have the honor of ONCB, the Office of the Narcotics Control Board of Thailand, Ms. Kavinvaddee, the Director of the Foreign Affairs Bureau, joining us as well. For our agenda today, we will start off with opening remarks from Mr. Benedict Hoffman, followed by an in-depth briefing on the latest report by Mr. Inshik Shim, and also a presentation on Thailand's efforts to counter the drugs problem over the past year by Ms. Kavinvaddee. So without further ado, I would like to invite Mr. Benedict Hoffman for the opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dee, and welcome everyone to what turns out to be quite an intimate evening, I guess. Thank you so much all for coming. As Dee mentioned already, we're here today to talk about the latest trends and figures and provide an update that comes out of our latest report on the synthetic drug situation in East and Southeast Asia. And you know, I think in order to sum up the situation with regard to the trends, I think there's only one way to put it, which is that the situation is clearly getting worse when we're looking at the key trends related to synthetic drug production, to synthetic drug trafficking in the region. And there are some very basic ways kind of to see that situation getting worse. I mean, you know, if we look a few years back, then we would have said, you know, one seizure of methamphetamine being seized somewhere in the region is a big deal, is a big problem. And these days, one ton of methamphetamine always doesn't create a headline anymore. It's kind of shrugged off, oh, just another seizure. Instead, we're talking kind of almost on a weekly basis about 5-ton seizures and even more. So we're seeing seizures getting bigger and bigger, and that even while the number of seizures are actually getting less. And of course that brings up the question, okay, what happens with all these large shipments that we are seeing seized, but that are not being seized, because we are having fewer cases of seizures, right? So we are having bigger shipments, we are having fewer seizures, we are probably looking at significantly expanded synthetic drug production here in this region. And I think, you know, we're going to hear a bit more about that from Konsirikun, and really I want to use that opportunity to highlight the efforts by some of the countries here in the region, especially Thailand. I think, you know, when looking at their seizures, again, a few years back, I think we reported for the first time 1 billion of Yaba tablets seized by all the countries in the region combined. Last year, Thailand alone seized more than 1 billion of Yaba tablets. So it really goes to show the scale of the problem that we're looking at, and sort of the continued expansion of that problem. The second element I just want to highlight is really the continued issues of chemicals going into synthetic drug production in the region. I think it's one of the key sort of problems that we're looking at here in the region is the question of, you know, what kind of chemicals are actually going into the drugs. We know what the drugs are made of, and Inchik will talk to that in his presentation. But there are very few seizures of these key chemicals being made in the region. And so that continued sort of trying to catch up with organized crime groups and the way that they source their chemicals, the way that they combine their chemicals, the way that they synthesize the drugs is something that continues to be a major problem in the region. And the third point I just want to highlight with regard to sort of the overall trends is the increased sophistication that we're seeing when it comes to drug trafficking operations in the region. Whether that's related to the way that drugs are being brought across borders, where we're seeing, and maybe we'll hear about that from ONCV as well. Where we're seeing caravans of cars being used. We're seeing more violence in some ways. We're seeing also more use of technology and sort of linking into some of the other sort of technology-based criminal ecosystems that we know exist in this region, for example, for money laundering. And so what we've done in this year's report is to reflect some of these trends as kind of cross-cutting challenges that the region is facing. And before I hand over to Inchik to really dive a bit into the report, I just want to put all of these trends and all of this, what's happening, a little bit into context. And I think there are two key issues that I really want to highlight. One is the continued link and problem of the linkage of the situation into the situation in Myanmar. I think the governance challenges there are really in many ways what's driving a lot of this expanded drug production. We continue to see the majority of these drugs being produced in some parts of the border areas, especially in Shan State. And so those governance challenges have been around for a while. They're really expanding. They're continuing to be exacerbated. And they're really what create the environment in which all of this expansion is taking place. The second element that I want to just highlight sort of as context is really that this drug economy is not just the only issue that the region is facing. We're really looking at a rapidly growing ecosystem of criminality. Everyone is aware and talking of things like scam centers. We're looking at rapidly expanding and evolving cybercrime related activity in the region. And that sort of is all now coming together and converging with the more traditional types of criminality, like the expanding drug economy, like other forms of criminality like human trafficking and so forth. So that's really creating an ecosystem which keeps expanding, which keeps evolving, but which also keeps to bring in increased resources to organized crime groups, which is then in turn reinvested into the kind of activities we're seeing. So just to add a little bit of that context and to give in broad strokes the terms, but I'll leave it here and I'll hand over to Kavinvaddee maybe and then Inchik to really get into the report and dive a bit into the finding before we then hear from ONCB on their perspectives and the challenges. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I think for this we can save the questions for until after all the presentations are done, because I imagine the questions might be linked to the situations that we'll hear from both Inchik and Ms. Sitagun. So without further ado, Inchik, please go ahead with the briefing on the report.
Thank you, Dee. Hello, everyone. Good evening. It's my great pleasure to share major findings of this year's synthetic drug in East and Southeast Asia, latest development challenges. I would like to start with some presentation themes. First one is that there has been an explosive growth in the illicit manufacture and trafficking of synthetic drugs since the military takeover in Myanmar. And that has brought some spillover effects of this increased methamphetamine trafficking from the Golden Triangle to many different parts of East and Southeast Asia, including Thailand, and also beyond. And we see that some remarkable agility of organized crime groups which can be evidenced by this emergence of these new trafficking corridors, production sites, and also some substances, and innovative method of the methamphetamine synthesis. Benedict already mentioned some of the key challenge associated with non-controlled chemicals. We see the increased number and quantities of non-controlled chemicals being trafficked across borders into Myanmar. And this year, we had a separate section for this cross-cutting challenge to discuss organized crime groups behind this drug production and trafficking. We will try to examine their characteristics and how they have been used, the technology, and their modus operandi to significantly engineer the expansion of the synthetic drugs in the region. And I want to end my presentation today with this, basically the need for constantly make an investment in both drug use prevention and supply reduction strategies. So to give you a bit of background of this report, we've been published this report over the last 15 years annually, and the data has been gathered through official channels from drug authorities across from the countries across the region. And also this data has been supplemented by the anecdotal evidence and also some intelligence from the drug authorities. This year report we structured with some different drug types, starting with the methamphetamines, ketamine, ecstasy, and new psychoactive substances and other synthetic drugs, and also had a special chapter for cross-cutting challenge. So let me start with the methamphetamine, which is the primary drug concern for all countries in East and Southeast Asia. This is the latest figure that we gathered. By the end of 2024, countries in East and Southeast Asia collectively seized 236 tons of methamphetamine, which represent a 24% increase compared to 2023. I think it is really important to highlight that this is a seizure, which means that there has been a lot of shipments been slipped through and ended up in the markets. If you think about that, the significant quantities of methamphetamines been available in this region. There's one particular trend that we see that the seizures made in Southeast Asia has been rapidly increasing over the last decade. In 2024, 221 tons of methamphetamine was seized in Southeast Asia that represent 94% of the total methamphetamine seizures in East and Southeast Asia. On the other hand, East Asia only seized 14.4 tons, represent only 6% of the total. If you look at 10 years ago, in 2015, the seizure amounts between East Asia and Southeast Asia was almost equal, with around 32 tons. But over the last decade, you can see that there has been a profound change in the methamphetamine market, where now we see the methamphetamine supply level is something that we have never seen before. It's really unprecedented levels. This year, when you look at some of the different methamphetamine types, there are two types, right? The crystal meth, known as ice, and meth tablet, known as yaba in Thailand. Both methamphetamine types, yaba and ice, seizures of these two types increased at the same time in 2024. I think it is quite important to highlight that the Thailand alone seized more than 1 billion tablets. And in total, in the region, 1.5 billion methamphetamine tablets were seized, which represent 33% increase compared to last year. And also at the same time, the seizures of crystal meth was surpassed 100 tons. And 102 tons was seized in the region, basically marking the 14% increase. We wanted to understand why there has been increases in supply of this methamphetamine in the region. And one way to look at it is what is happening in the Shan State, Myanmar, because that's the area where the basically predominant quantities of meth available in the region has been originated from. So we look at some of the data on the insecurity and conflict data, because when there is conflict, as many of the across many different countries around the world, when there are intensified conflicts and insecurity, the actors involved in these conflicts been trying to increasingly rely on the money or illicit proceeds generated from drugs. So that is why we wanted to look at this conflict data. First one is to look at the total number of conflicts in Myanmar. We compare the two distinct periods. One is since the military takeover in Myanmar in 2021, and after 3 years, and prior 3 years before the military takeover, to compare these two distinct periods. There has been basically 1,000% increase in the conflict in Myanmar. But if you look at some of the states in Shan State, for instance, they are relatively secure. So it's not all states and regions of Myanmar is under severe conflict or intensified conflicts, especially East Shan. If you look at it, basically there has been no change. There has been very stable. But we all know that where all these drug production sites are located, mainly in Eastern states, where the Special Region 2 are located. And conflict also hampered the law enforcement operation, because law enforcement, when there is a conflict, there is a limitation to access to some areas. So if you look at it, there has been a 40% decrease in the number of cases for methamphetamine tablet in Myanmar, about 30% decrease in the number of cases for crystal meth in Myanmar. However, in terms of quantity seized, there has been a significant increase, especially for crystal meth, about the 50% increase if you compare the two distinct periods. And as a result, the average quantity seized in Myanmar also really increased significantly. So what we can say that from this, this data, and we can see that the conflict may have driven the expansion of synthetic drug production and trafficking, but at the same time, not just because of the conflict, but some of the stability in the key production area of Myanmar has created this conducive environment for the expansion of production and trafficking of synthetic drugs. So we look at the national level seizure data. Thailand was by far when it comes to the methamphetamine seizures, amounting to 130 tons, followed by Myanmar, Laos, and Malaysia. So, and this year, when you look at it, the changes in the meth seizures between 2023 and 2024, countries in the Mekong and Malaysia basically reported increases in the seizures of meth, while some of the countries outside of Mekong reported some decreases in the seizures. We look at how this meth has been trafficked from Shan State, Myanmar, to many different parts of East and Southeast Asia, as far as Australia, New Zealand, and also increasingly South Asia. If you look at some of the main trafficking route in the region, still the northern Thailand border with Myanmar. That's, I would say, probably the biggest trafficking corridor in the world. But however, we also see some of the emerging trafficking corridor. One is the overland trafficking route from Myanmar to Cambodia via primarily Laos and also Thailand as well for onward maritime trafficking. The other route is the Malaysia, Indonesia, and Philippines, the maritime trafficking route, the connecting through the Sabah in Malaysia as a key transit hub. I don't know whether everyone knows where Sabah is. Malaysia looks like this, right? There's two. One is the Peninsula Malaysia and the East Malaysia. The Sabah is in the East Malaysia. And the last one is the westward trafficking route to India. That trafficking route has been exist for some years. However, it has become really intensified. So starting with Cambodia. Cambodia in 2024, the seizures of crystal meth amounted to nearly 10 tons. This is a record quantities of crystal meth seized in the country that represent 11 times increase compared to 5 years ago. This crystal meth, according to our Cambodian authorities, that's been primarily sold through the border with Lao PDL. There is a province called Stong Trang in Cambodia, and also some from Thailand as well. And mainly they are stored in Phnom Penh. After that, this distribution and the subsequent trafficking through maritime route from mainly Sihanouk Bill and Koh Kong. This is a representative case. Last year, November, there was a record seizure in one single case in Cambodia. Over 4 tons of crystal meth and 411 kilos of ketamine was seized in Cambodia. It was basically sourced from Myanmar through Thailand and was destined to Taiwan by fishing boat. This one shows the kind of maritime trafficking routes connecting from the Mekong to Malaysia, Indonesia, and the Philippines. Especially if you look at the trends recently, the seizures of this crystal meth in Sabah and Sarawak, which is next to Sabah, has been rapidly increasing in Malaysia. And intelligence authorities on all these 3 countries share some information with us that this Sabah has become very important key transit hub for this maritime trafficking of these 3 countries. And also there are organized crime groups that has a very strong presence operating around Sabah areas that connecting all these 3 countries through maritime routes. This is a representative case reported from the Philippines, Zamboanga, last year, May 2024. The quantity itself was not really a lot compared to what we see in Mekong. However, the Philippine authority told us that this was a record quantity that seized in one single case in Zamboanga, and they are really quite concerned with the growing methamphetamines that traffic through their southern part of the country. India, that we've been monitoring closely on how this methamphetamine from Myanmar, Shan State, all the way to northeastern India, for instance, Mizoram and Nagaland and those areas. And if you look at it, in the past, we would say basically the seizures of meth tablet involving maybe one trafficking case is mainly like around 200,000 or even less than that. However, we see over 1 million tablet single seizure case as well. Recently, about 2.7 million tablets were seized in India in one case. And also, the crystal meth has been increasing the traffic from this region to India as well. So this is the data from India that you show the 6-time increases in seizures of this amphetamine type stimulant, which is basically methamphetamine and amphetamine, but mainly is crystal methamphetamine in India. There is a two-way trafficking flows while the drugs from Myanmar has been trafficked to India, but at the same time, the chemicals or cutting agent, such as caffeine, has been trafficked from India to Myanmar. And this is a case that reported from Myanmar that was seized in Sagaing. Sagaing shares border with India. And this particular case involving 412 kilos of crystal meth, 5.5 million of meth tablet, 150 kilos of heroin, and 3 tons of caffeine, which is a cutting agent. The investigation from Myanmar reveals that these drugs were meant to sold to the areas along the border between Myanmar and India. And it's quite important to note that the Sagaing really never had the seizures of crystal meth before. In 2023, there was 0 crystal meth was seized in Sagaing. But now the traffickers have been trying to bring crystal meth into Myanmar through Sagaing area while they are sourcing caffeine from India. So this caffeine was sourced from India and was found at a storage site in Sagaing. Moving on to chemical, since we talked about the working agent caffeine, we've been looking at some of the chemical seizures. And if you look at it, all the chemicals seized in Myanmar in 2024, 96% of them are non-controlled chemicals. So I think it is quite important for us to explain a little bit on these non-controlled chemicals. Some of the chemicals, such as ephedrine and pseudoephedrine and P2P, which are precursors for methamphetamines, are controlled internationally. So trade of this chemical requires some regulatory work. However, this non-controlled chemical is not the case. And the organized crime group's been using these non-controlled chemicals to evade this regulatory mechanism put in place internationally. This particular case is important. It was again from Sagaing that was originated from, the chemicals were originated from India. And this particular chemical, propiopenone, more than 1,000 liters of propiopenone was seized. This is a precursor for ephedrine. A precursor for ephedrine. And there are only 2 chemicals that we were able to see that can be used for either ephedrine or P2P. One is this, and the other one is P2P. What I want to get at that is the understanding of how these key chemicals, precursors, how they are sourced to Shan State, Myanmar. Understanding of that is quite limited because when you look at some of the cases, mainly involving solvent and reagents other than key chemicals. However, when we look at the forensic profiles of this methamphetamine, these are data from Thailand, which is quite important because Thailand forensic profile data can tell us a lot of things, especially how meth may have been manufactured in the Golden Triangle. Especially for crystal meth in 2024, the number of samples believed to be manufactured with ephedrine and pseudoephedrine base amounted to 80%. Compared to just 2022, there was a significant increase because it was only 31%. Meth tablet, also very stable. 65 to 70% of the samples been believed to be manufactured with ephedrine and pseudoephedrine base. However, again, we don't really see the key chemicals associated with the ephedrine and pseudoephedrine based manufacture. I think, we have seen this supply. There's significant quantities of meth supply coming out from the Shan State, Myanmar to many different countries in the region. And what will be the impact of that? And I think the Thailand data also gives us some understanding of it. Thailand has done recently national household survey for drug use. And it was done 4 years ago, again, 2016 and 2020 as well. We look at the data, and we were able to see that there has been a quadruple increase in the number of estimated methamphetamine tablet users. It kind of shows a very strong correlation with the increases in supply of drug into the country. Crystal meth shows a slightly different picture than methamphetamine tablets. While the number of estimated crystal meth users in Thailand also increased between 2016 to 2024 by 2 times, the increase was not as significant as meth tablet. And this, I think, shows us that crystal meth, the traffic to Thailand, are not mainly just for the destination, but also use Thailand as a transit point. And I think that this map can explain why that may be the case. And we try to compare the wholesale prices of 1 kilogram of crystal meth coming from the production site of Shan State all the way to different countries in the region. From the production site, according to the intelligence that we gathered, is about $450 per kilogram. Very, very cheap. But when it reached the northern Thailand border, it's around $3,000 per kilogram. In medium price of Thailand is about 4,300. But when it goes to southern Thailand and Malaysian border, it goes up to 7,500. And when it goes reach to Australia, it has become $180,000, which is a 400 times increase compared to the production site price in Shan State. There's an immense, I would say, incentives for organized crime groups to bring the crystal meth out of Myanmar through Thailand or through Laos or through Cambodia to reach these destination markets. The meth is also sourced from other countries and other regions as well. If you look at it, for instance, in the Philippines, there has been some uptick in the meth sourced from Golden Crescent, the Iran, Pakistan, and Afghanistan area. And also other countries like Malaysia and Indonesia also have been seizing some of the meth sourced from Golden Crescent, which is not the case for the Mekong countries. Mekong countries are basically predominantly Golden Triangle. North American meth are also trafficked from Mexico, US, and Canada to countries like Japan and Korea and Philippines as well. Some quantities of African meth are also found in some markets in the region as well. So meth use has been increasing because of lack of the many drug demand indicator in the region. We look at treatment data or expert perception data. We did an interview with some of the scholars and government officials. When it comes to meth tablet, 4 out of 5 countries reported the increases in meth tablet use in 2024. Crystal meth use, 8 out of 10 countries reported increases in crystal meth use. However, there is also good news. It's not everything is bad. When we look at the number of the young, I would say the drug users, meth users, the admitted to treatment facility for methamphetamine use has been decreasing in several countries, including Thailand, Malaysia, and Singapore as well. This is a really positive news. On the other end, the older user population, the number has been increasing in these 3 countries. There are some commonalities among these 3 countries. And I think that we have to really give a credit to the governments that has been implementing the very strong drug use prevention campaign targeting youth population in Thailand, Say No to Drugs, and many other the campaign, I think, that have really attributed to these positive developments. And I will move on to ketamine. Ketamine has become basically second, I think, most important synthetic drug after methamphetamine in the region. Seizures of ketamine in 2024 was about 18.4 tons. marking a 21% decrease compared to 2023. However, the seizure levels really remain high levels compared to few years prior to 2022. Thailand again sees the most quantities of ketamine in 2024, followed by Taiwan and Cambodia and China. I mentioned earlier in my presentation that we see the remarkable agility of organized crime groups. When there was a cracking down on this ketamine production in China, they have relocated their production site in Shan State, Myanmar. That was around 2016. And then we saw that happen in Cambodia in 2022, and Laos in 2023, and most recently in Vietnam as well. So Vietnam authorities seized this industrial scale ketamine production facilities in March this year. This lab was set up by the criminal groups from China and Taiwan. They have very distinctive roles. While the Chinese were sourcing chemicals and setting up this lab, Taiwanese syndicate members were producing ketamine. I think that the reason why they're really targeting this lower Mekong country is also showing that some of the law enforcement challenges, but at the same time they want to bring their production site closer to their main destination market that include China and Taiwan. And we look at how these ketamines are trafficked from Shan State to Thailand that sees most quantities of ketamine. When you compare with the kind of trafficking trends between ketamine and crystal meth, you can see quite distinctive patterns that can be observed in ketamine trafficking. Is the western border of Thailand. Why crystal meth is not really trafficked through western border. There were cases back in the days, but not anymore. But we see the ketamines are moving from Shan State to Mirawaddy area in Myanmar. So that there's been several seizures of ketamine seized in Mirawaddy, but also Tak area in Thailand as well. The report that we received is there has been a increased availability of this ketamine in Mirawaddy, and there must be some storage site as well. And I think it is quite important that we also see some growing criminality in Mirawaddy that associate with scam centers and stuff. Also, we were able to see in the Philippines that we also mentioned in the report that some of the Philippines is not also a country that has a traditional ketamine use. However, the increased quantities of ketamines are coming into the Philippines. Some of them are associated with Pogo, which is that has been a hot topic for the scam centers in the Philippines. Cambodia, again, has become really important transit hub for not only meth, but ketamine trafficking. One thing that I want to highlight here is that most of the ketamines were seized in Phnom Penh. 3 tons of ketamines were seized in Phnom Penh, while the others were really small quantities, less than 10 kilo, 2 kilo, 0.6 kilos. They're really small quantities. But the Cambodian authorities shared information that most of the ketamines are also trafficked through Laopedia. But the provinces that shares border with, or Cambodia that shares border with Laos do not really seize ketamines. I think that shows that some of the border management challenges or in identification or detection of this ketamine traffic through Laopedia to Cambodia and ended up in the Phnom Penh for further trafficking. Ketamine is also sourced from Europe, which is quite, many of the colleagues from Europe, they think that drugs do not come to here from Europe, but that's not the case. We see the intensified scale of this ketamine trafficking from Europe to this region. Now we see like 81 kilos in Hong Kong, 52 kilos in Korea, and several between 10 to 15 kilos of these shipments of ketamine from Europe to Malaysia and Vietnam as well. I think quite simple. The European countries are also witnessing the expansion of the ketamine market in these countries, but they were not really aware of this ketamine as the choice of the recreational drugs. So, but the criminals been starting to bringing ketamine from Europe to this region, and I think the main reason is the attractive price in the region, especially for Korea, for instance. That 1 gram of this ketamine is about $250. But the latest data from the Netherlands it shows only $21, 24 euro basically. Very, very cheap. So for them, that's why we see some of the European criminals were trying to also push this ketamine into the region for the expected return by doing so. The ketamine use also shows some increases in several countries. Again, I think when there is a supply, demand follows. And this is the case for the ketamine as well. Especially we see the rapid increases in Vietnam. The number of treatment admission has increased like 5 times over the last just 3 years due to ketamine use. Other countries, including Cambodia, Singapore, and Thailand, also report increases in ketamine-related treatment admissions. Let me move on. Other synthetic drugs. There is a synthetic drugs classified as new psychoactive substances that are not, which means that they are not internationally classified as controlled substances, but they mimic the effects of those known traditional drugs. In 2024, there was 23 new MPS were identified in the regions, and 9 of them are from synthetic cannabinoids. Quite interestingly, since China has put on these the scheduling ban on synthetic cannabinoids, they didn't really find any synthetic cannabinoids in 2020, new synthetic cannabinoids, at least in 2024. However, a country like Indonesia, Malaysia, and Vietnam has been continuously reporting the identification of synthetic cannabinoids. I think one other element that I want to highlight is etomidate. You may have heard in Bangkok as well. There was several cases of etomidate seizures, and even there was an attempt to make etomidate in Thailand as well. This etomidate is a pharmaceutical product, basically. It's a hypnotic agent that used for anesthetic purposes. It is sold as like space oil and many cool names in the region. They're mainly found in the vaping products. Is because the criminals have been putting into e-liquid juice, and they are often found together with some synthetic cannabinoids or ketamines or MDMA type as well. So I'd like to stop talking about drug itself, but the people behind, organized crime groups behind of this drug trafficking and production. More and more we see of these criminal groups, they are really cell-based network. And when we talk to authorities, one of their main challenge is to get to the top level drug traffickers. Because these traffickers, those powerful international drug trafficking groups, when they infiltrate into certain country, for instance, let's say Thailand, they hire local managers, and then this local manager manages this local transportation as well. So some of the fishermen and transporters, they were hired by these middlemen. Some of them were not even aware of the true nature of their jobs. And also the financiers, transporters, and suppliers, and everybody has very dedicated role, and often they do not know other than their roles, their members that are working together in this. So even if they got into, even if our authorities arrest some of the transporters, they don't often get into the middleman or even above echelons of these drug trafficking supply chains. So that has become very, very challenging for the law enforcement in the region. And also they've been using all these sophisticated technologies through the entire drug supply chain, from the production and all the way to the money laundering, especially for planning and coordinations. Encrypted communication platforms are basically main norm. And when it comes to execution of trafficking, we see that the criminal groups been using, for instance, drones to monitor the presence of law enforcement or patrol patterns of law enforcement. Even in the Golden Triangle area, when we travel to the northern border, the authority mentioned to us that drones been flying around across the Mekong River to see their law enforcement's movements. And also the GPS trackers that put it in the vehicles, and this somewhat middleman level been monitoring the movements of drugs coming through the different border areas by transporters. When these transporters got detected by law enforcement, they cut off the communication and everything, so that basically they were out of this trafficking chain, However, they can monitor this entire the transportation of these drugs. And also financial transaction. We see the growing use of cryptocurrency. That's a really norm as well, especially for drug authorities. Back in the days, maybe Kuning and our law enforcement authority agreed that back in the days when they arrested a drug trafficker, sometimes they were able to seize fiat currencies together with these big piles of money. But this is not the case anymore, and that's also another challenge. And laundering will proceed once you have a transactions done with a cryptocurrency. That makes a lot easier through these unregulated virtual asset service provider. The convergence. I think the drug trafficking groups are also converging with the different criminalities. One is the scam centers. Some of the cases reported from Thailand that clearly shows the money from drug trafficking and productions merged together with the money that made out of scam fraud activities and launder through these virtual asset service providers and distributed for different either buying properties or fund transfers and all these other. So the monies are basically mingled together, whether it's drug monies or other organized crime activities. At the same time, the criminal groups engaging in drug production and trafficking are also engaging in other criminal activities. So there is a convergence of actors as well. Whether it's the Myanmar armed groups that are known for drug production and trafficking are also involved in running illegal casinos, and that is enabled by supercharged with the cryptocurrency and money launderings and fraud activities, and also other criminal groups too as well. And chemicals. I think the chemical is basically, I would say, the starting point for all this drug production and trafficking. Without chemicals, basically there will be no drugs and no production and no trafficking. Even when starting the sourcing the chemicals, there is a cryptocurrency and there is a technology. And we look at those websites that selling those chemicals, and they often accept cryptocurrency for the transactions. And this is one just screenshot that we were able to find. And many of them basically accept cryptocurrency and provide a wide range of services for custom guarantee 100% and many other the services that really cater organized crime groups when it comes to sourcing chemicals. And drugs are also distributed through online channels. This is quite interesting. Thailand also had a really good study on that. When we look at the prices of the online drug, the drugs that are sourced from online, they're generally about 10 to 20% cheaper than the traditional street deal. I think that may also change in the future. It's growing as well, but maybe in the future might be a little bit more difficult for law enforcement authorities to deal with this distribution of this drug through these online channels. So you may recognize this golden triangle. This is a photo that when we visited, we took. So again, I think the key point is explosive growth in the synthetic drug production and trafficking from the Golden Triangle. Since this Myanmar military takeover, that impact has been felt across countries in the region and beyond as well. And also these organized crime groups that are agile and also innovative and that are cell-based have been able to successfully, continuously engineering the expansion of the synthetic drug market in East and Southeast Asia. I think, as I showed, there is a positive development as well that decreases the number of these younger meth users. I think it tells us a lot that we have to continuously make an investment on the drug use prevention strategies, as well as we need to enhance our efforts to reduce the supply reduction. I will end my presentation here, and later, if you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Inshik, for sharing insights into the latest report, especially highlighting the developments across methamphetamine, ketamine, ecstasy, NPS, and other synthetic drugs. As we can see, organized crime have been very adaptable and adjusting to the various controls, whether operational or legal, by expanding routes and production sites, exploiting technologies, and also pushing supply of new synthetic drug products into the market. We say it almost every year, but every year we see record levels of methamphetamine, and also we still have a high supply of other synthetic drugs, which is supported by the continued diversion of chemicals, mostly non-controlled chemicals, to support the ongoing expansion of the production of these synthetic drugs. But the increase in seizures also shows successful interdiction efforts by law enforcement agencies in the region. And as we saw, Thailand seized over half of the regional total this year, which isn't just a reflection of the increased flow of drugs entering Thailand, but also a testament to Thailand's efforts to control the drug trafficking of drugs within the region. And from the data on drug use, we also see the successful impact of the drug prevention programs to reduce the use of drugs among youth populations in the country. So luckily, as I mentioned, fortunately, we have the Office of the Narcotics Control Board of Thailand here with us today. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Ms. Kavinvaddee, Director of the ONCB Foreign Affairs Bureau, to share on Thailand's leadership efforts and progress in responding to the synthetic drug problem in the region. Thank you very much.
ขอบคุณค่ะคุณเบเนดิกต์คุณอินชิก thank you very much on behalf of ONCB. It's our great pleasure, to maybe I think for the situation itself, maybe to add on some perspective of it, and I will skip quickly because to save time and maybe focus more on our efforts, and maybe it's one of the factor that contribute to the high seizures, in particular in the case of Thailand, and also for your household survey that you presented, maybe we can provide more of the evidence of the registered treatment it can support, and we can verify the reasons why the situation or the impact another side or perspective. Okay, so as you know, in Thailand situation, yaba remained a major drug of serious concern in Thailand. Okay, apart from we are the area where the epidemic of yaba is nationwide and very serious, critical, the only one and number one drug of use in Thailand, and it's caused the high impact to Thai society because of the mental disorder, because it has been a problem, I think, more than 2 decades. So we can be the living evidence of the effect of long-term use of yaba. So apart from, for the position of Thailand, particular, we are the, get the effect of the yaba, and we also the transit route to international market, particularly for heroin, ice, ketamine, as Kun Inchik said earlier. So this is the area where the trafficking routes, so another picture can be clearer. So this is where the critical areas where the drug came in, keep coming in, and the trafficking routes is the yellow color, so to the inner area, and the green is where they stock and pile up the supply of drugs and for the consignment of drugs to another country. So this is where the concealment method, all kinds, you may know, they use the courier, the drug mules, trafficking from the Golden Triangle area, the production sites, to the border along the north and eastern borders of Thailand, and then they pile up and to the border in Thailand, and then use the utilities, closed utilities car. They have the and also the modified compartment for the lorries car as well, for the big consignment and big trafficking batch. So this is somehow they also use the international parcels and luggage for certain types of drugs anyway. But for ice, for the big amount, usually they use the lorries and the utilities car. So this is the biggest case ever for the recent seizures in January. They submerge the cotton rolls with the liquid methamphetamine or ice liquid and tried to export actually to India, and it was rejected. So we seized and we found that this is another big issue. So we just had a bilateral meeting with India yesterday. So we got a good information, many perspectives I elaborate on later. Okay, so this is the seizures of drugs, the amount, and also the number of cases along with the number of quantity. So even though the number of the cases and offenders keep declining, but if you see in particular for the meth tablet or yaba, it keep increasing, and also for ice as well. But okay, I might draw attention to ketamine, even though it's lower in Thailand, but it may, balloon effects. It become higher in our neighboring country. You can see in Laos and also Cambodia, like Kun Ichik just said. And also, I would like to draw attention to heroin, because I got a lot of questions regarding heroin, what our observation. My personal observation, I think, the Golden Triangle will never ever be replacing the production as in Afghanistan earlier, because the area of insecure area in the past in Afghanistan is so huge. It was huge, and after the ban by Taliban, so many people doubtful where we can find a replacement. So if you ask about Golden Triangle, according to the UNODC, the survey as well, we can see that the number of hectares reducing, and even though, okay, for the production, the yield, the crop yields, even though the limited area, but because of the technology, they can produce more. But whatsoever, I still think, because of the climate, because if they face the drought, we can see the figure become plummeting immediately. And the technology to produce itself is difficult. Why not use the new synthetic drugs like opioid, the synthetic opioid? That's, I think, we better keep monitor it closer and closely. Right now we have cooperation with DEA to monitor it regularly. So it's still not we still not found the evidence that Golden Triangle start to produce the fentanyl or synthetic opioids. Then this is the package of yaba. So this is about yaba, the BY for the signatures. So the components of the yaba, as you may know, more than 80%, 20% to 80% is the pure methamphetamine or methamphetamine hydrochloride, and another 15 to 20%. 20%, vice versa, 20% methamphetamine and 70% to 80% are caffeine. So this is, is a real concern for Thailand. So the main talking point to our neighboring country, in particular for the chemical producing country like India and also China, we ask them to help to control caffeine, even though it's not the drugs type or category scheduled under the convention of the UN. So for the precursor chemical, we also see big amount of the precursor and chemicals control under the the convention. This one, the toluene, acetone. Yeah, and recently we also, like Ishik said, etomidate. So etomidate become, increasingly concerned, in particular for China. But anyway, we still don't find any abuse of ethomidone widely in Thailand. So for treatment and rehabilitation, like Kun Ichik said, it's a good side. Some small good news that it's not the young age people. It become like more like the working people, young worker, we may say, like on the screen, about the 25 to 39 years of age. But anyway, the new drug users still keep increasing though. So maybe we focus more on the policy and strategy response to the situation. So the current Prime Minister, she followed track of her father. If you may know that the previous Prime Minister Thaksin came over to visit ONCB yesterday, and he gave some directives and recommendations to the work that one important aspect is about we need to work more proactively and approach more to neighboring countries. Actually, we have done a lot so far, but a lot of confounding factors that we cannot control, whether the neighboring country can provide the cooperation as we expect or not. So, okay, under her top 10 agenda, okay, definitely the drug control, eradication of drug and mental, the negative consequences of drug use to the Thai society and returned the safe society to communities is definitely on top of the agenda of the current government. So she expand the area we call the triple S strategies. The first S is the seal the borders. So from the previous Prime Minister, we have the command centers we call 2-4 and 3-5 to seal the border in the northeastern and in the north. And under her leadership, under Kun Pathongta, we expand to the west as well. Like we observed more and more situation down there on the west side. So this is maybe another reason why the figure is so high in Thailand, because we set up the KPI, the key indicator for the army, for the police forces, to interdict the drugs at the border area. We not count the points equally for the interdiction at the border itself and interdiction in the inner area. The point will be counted just only the big seizures along the border. So this is maybe the reason why the KPI drives the skyrocketing number of the drug seized in Thailand. So you can see the number of the cases arrested and seized along the border is almost double, and also the number of drugs 50% increased compared in the same period of time last year and this year. This is the day they announced the seal stop safe. So this is the major case under the, after the announcement of seal stop safe. So this is so huge arrest, like million tablets of yabas, and also together with another, 750 kilograms of ice, 300 kilograms of ketamine, coming down. So they pile up somewhere and come to the inner area. We wait until the right time to make the arrest. So a lot of operations, apart from the seal operation over there, and then we try to, stop and suppress the trafficking into the area. We have operation called, literally translated into English, we put out the fire upwind. So that means we strike the problem at the source of the problem. So we try to find the network. We set up the KPI for the police themselves and also for the ONCB as well, because ONCB rather take care of the big networks. And also we set up the critical case, the dangerous case for the police. Yeah, they need to come up with the KPI. And this one another operation for the retailers, because this one, even though the retailers in the communities, even though we press them by stern measure, even though we get back with the small amount of drugs evidence, but another impact that we would like to create is the awareness in the communities itself. They should know that the government try hard to get rid out of the problem from the communities. So we also do the drug treatment and social rehabilitation. Under the new laws, we expand the screening center to almost 10,000 throughout nationwide, and we follow the WHO standards. So whether the level of the dependence and also mental disorder as well, the psychosis attached. So, and we have the drug treatment facilities, 1,000 units, and rehab facilities, 270 about. And social rehabilitation before return them to the communities, we try to gain a lot of support from the Ministry of Home Affairs. Yesterday it's become a big talk as well that the previous Prime Minister Thaksin, he focused and he talked directly to the Minister of Home Affairs that he would like the local administration office to join and to provide the social rehab centers for the communities. Apart from this is another measures about the drug prevention. So because we, with the invitation letter, they asked us to talk about the Thailand effort for not just for Thailand itself, but for the international communities. So this is our initiatives, because as we faced a big problem of the drug user who get a mental disorder, and they started to harm their own family members and become dangerous to communities. Apart from screen them and put them into treatment centers, we try to find out the proper medicine for them, because right now we have harm reductions and the robust methodologies how to help them, like MMT, methadone maintenance. But how about the yaba and meth type, the stimulant disorder? So we signed the MOU with the academic network, and we have the trial start soon with the Chiang Mai University to try, after the review, meta-analysis for the available technical evidence, we chose 3 medicines to be used for the drug addicts who get the mental disorder. And let's see, hopefully it's going to be quite a long time, because until we have the robust findings, and then this is going to be big contribution for, I think, the whole region and the world, if we can find something to help the meth addicts and their mental disorder. So the prevention activities, like Kun Ichik gave credits to the activities that done in Thailand. So yeah, we we try to use a lot of social media. The recent program is about TikTok, yeah, and we just opened last week the new campaign, Hug Your Dream, Light Up Your Life. But still, we promote young people at the high school, 2 levels, the upper and the lower high school students, to come in and compete for the first prize. And altogether, it's going to be like worth 16 million baht for them. And the winner, top 10 team, to have the video clip by using TikTok to promote the dangers of drugs and fight against drugs. The top 10, and we will propose the top 10 to UNODC to help to select the best team. And the best team will be invited to join the CND again. Yeah, next year. So it's quite rewarding for them. Yeah, if you may know, the team this March, they're from poor, very poor family background. Some of their dad and mom addicted to drugs, and some in the prison. So yeah, it happened. We didn't look at the background, but they made it so good. Yeah. Okay, this is the name of the drugs that we try. The medicine, yeah, the illicit drugs to help the people with mental disorder from meth long-term use. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, this is what we done at the CND. We tabled the resolution on the research on evidence-based intervention for treatment and care of stimulant use disorders. And coming next month in August, we're going to host the international conference on the same issue, on Yaba, and the same issue as well. So another contributions, just run quickly. Yeah, we set up the ASEAN Narco, and also we produce the same thing, like annual report as well, but in particular for the situation, to monitor the situation in ASEAN country, and also we project and recommend the policy responses for ASEAN. Alternative development, we run the project, have been running alternative development project in the critical area along the border, not just only inside Thailand, but also outside, on the Myanmar side, to be like a defensive fence for Thailand as well, and long-term sustainable solution to the drug problem. This is the area in Myanmar that we invested our infrastructure and also long-term sufficiency economy for them. And another initiative by Thailand is the Sep Mek Khong Coordination Center. So this is on the law enforcement and suppression side, and also intelligence for quick and real-time exchange of information, and also data analysis for the policy responses. So we also, fund the focal points in neighboring countries in each single year as well. We focus on both suppression and also prevention. We give away the money to Myanmar, Laos, and Cambodia and Vietnam. So this maybe I claim too much, but I think partly, apart from the money itself, they make a request, but we would give the money just on the activities that we think it will help the situation of the region as a whole. Like if they want car, maybe we won't give car, but we give trainings for the law enforcement officer at the front lines, like that. And avoid duplication definitely with the UNODC. Yeah, sure. Otherwise, it's waste of money. Okay, and another one. We also post minister counselor to 5 countries Vietnam, China, Myanmar, Laos, and Cambodia, and work closely with the focal points there. And last one, the newest initiative, International Narcotics Control College. Last week, we just have the joint co-host, the drug intelligence, with the New Zealand Police and Customs. This is one way that we can make contribution to the region. And our audience, main audience, definitely at the CLNV countries. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Director Sitakul, for sharing Thailand's efforts across not only law enforcement and the supply side, but also on the demand side, where there's rehabilitation, social reintegration efforts, harm reduction, and prevention. As you know, with Thailand's location near production sites and with all of the long borders connecting to neighboring countries, it's quite a difficult situation for Thailand to be in. So congratulations to Thailand for all the efforts that you've had over the past many years in addressing the drug problem in the situation. Also for your leadership in not only the sub-regional sphere, but also in the regional sphere and also the interregional, especially as Inshik mentioned, we're seeing more connections with this region and India. So very great to hear that you had a bilateral meeting with India just the other day. So we can see maybe we can help address that side of the interregional trafficking as well. So now I'd like to open the floor to any questions you might have for any of the panelists today. I have a question. Will there be a microphone there at the back of the room? If you have any questions.
Okay, I think it's working. Tony Davis from Janes. I have a question specifically about Laos and northwestern Laos, which borders Thailand. What we've seen in recent months is a series of massive interdictions of yaba, right? 20 million tablets, 19 million tablets, et cetera, et cetera. So my question, and that seems to have spilled into armed conflict in northern Laos between unidentified elements and Laos security forces, which I'm guessing might have something to do with narcotics. So my question is simply, does the situation in northwestern Laos reflect production in Laos or spillover from Shan State? And if there is production in Laos, how significant is that? And is it only yaba, or are we looking at crystal meth as well? Thank you.
Let's see whether we compare notes. You first and I.
Okay, so from my understanding, at least, is that yes, there is yaba production in Laos as well. The scale itself is not that significant compared to Myanmar, but there has been a few cases of yaba production in Laos that we have seen. But I think these cases of the significant recent, the millions of yaba tablets been seized in Laos is more connected to spillover effects. For crystal meth, I haven't really seen it. Out in Bar, there is an opportunity. I mean, there is any possible site of crystal meth production in Laos. Out in Bar, the possibility of that. However, we have seen, because ketamine precursors has been manufactured in Laos. But to answer your question, for these specific cases that you mentioned, this is more related to spillover effects. But there is also yaba production in Laos, yes.
For me, there is high possibility of the meth tablet production in Laos and also ice. But to my bare eyes, I saw the photos of the sack of ice, but no equipment. So I might say possibility of the production side, because it's not from the real evidence that I found by myself, but it's based on the intelligence of other agencies only. Not by ONCB itself, but from other countries as well that gave me the evidence. So there is possibility for both.
If I just may add a little bit on this, I think when you look at, there's a particular telltale signatures of this golden triangle crystal meth. What are those well-known packages of, Guanin Wang and the others. There is a particular TBAC package that has not been found in Myanmar, but has been found in Laos, and then also some of the countries that seized meth that traffic through Laos. Of course, it doesn't mean automatically that was manufactured in Laos, but there is a high also probability that may have been actually originated from Laos. So.
Maybe if I can just add one thing while everyone else thinks about other questions. I think we've for a few years now seen sort of a strong connectivity between parts of Myanmar and parts of Laos when it comes to the trafficking situation, right? And so some of the seizures that you were referring to, like these large-scale seizures, definitely also tie back to these linkages, right? And I think those incidents that you were mentioning, the increased violence in a way that we're seeing in parts of Laos. It's not to say that this is the same kind of conflict type of violence that we're seeing in Myanmar. I think it's quite different, but there's definitely a sense of sort of the drug trafficking, the drug production situation getting more complicated, the type of kind of conflict type related violence that we are seeing in some parts of the region, potentially also affecting other parts of the region, and so that's definitely something we're looking at with concern as well. Yeah.
Thank you. Please go ahead. Yes.
Sorry, hi, good evening everyone. I'm Pierre Prakash from International Crisis Group. First of all, thanks to the panelists for a very informative session. I have a question related to Myanmar. As several of you pointed out, a lot of the production emanates from Myanmar. That's not new. It seems to be growing in scale. But the question I was getting to is that much of the production has been in the hands of ethnic armed groups. That's been a way of funding their activities for many, many years. But now we're looking at a much more sophisticated international articulation of that trade, it seems. And my question is, can you talk a bit about the articulation between actually the producers, who seem to be more the ethnic armed groups than the criminal syndicates themselves, if I'm not mistaken, and the articulation between the two? And part of the reason I asked this question is that when it comes to scam centers, and the presentation highlighted that there are some links, and it seems that the actors, or at least the money, is being bundled together, which points to the actors being the same. When it comes to the scam centers are actually, the ethnic armed group seems to be staying away from that largely, and it's more on the junta side and their affiliates that they're working with the scam centers, whereas on the drug side of things, it's more the ethnic armed groups, or both sides. So does that mean that these criminal syndicates are able to work with both sides of that conflict in a nutshell?
Yes, I will start. I think the drug trafficking, if you look at the history of the Golden Triangle, they started with the heroin, but back in the day as well, there was a bit of separations. The armed groups were basically behind of this production of this heroin, but when it comes to bringing all this heroin out of this country to reach the destination market, there was a clear role of the organized crime groups. Same applies to this methamphetamine synthetic drug trade. These armed groups have a clear role in controlling the production and sourcing, supplying this drug, but financing of these operations, or sourcing these drugs coming out from Myanmar to reach the market in Australia or Korea or Japan or Taiwan. Basically, there is an organized crime groups have these roles when it comes to that. There was a bit of like attempt, I think, one of the powerful armed groups in Myanmar wants to control a bit of the retail market as well, but it didn't really go, I think, in a way that they wanted it.
I think if I can just add, what armed groups in Myanmar, whichever part of the spectrum, whichever side of the spectrum they might be on, right? What they have to offer at the end is control of territory, is sovereignty in a way over particular parts of the country, right? And that's what they offer to this kind of criminal ecosystem that is underlying this drug production situation. Now, the involvement of the groups really varies by degree in a way, right? So there are some that would essentially basically just offer up their territory, and there are some that would offer protection, there are some that would, you know, profit by taxation. And then there are some that are much more involved in, you know, getting chemists in there, you know, getting actually labs set up and production running, and also much more part of the distribution network, you know, and the sort of the supply chains that lead out of the country, right? So it really depends a little bit on the different situation, on the different groups and where they're coming from. But one key point is, and Inchi was kind of alluding to, is that this situation is a little bit different from sort of the traditional, you know, opium economy that we'd seen in Myanmar, you know, over the previous decades in a way, right? Where sort of the linkage between the farmers in a way, the people growing the opium, the people living in these areas, and those armed groups was quite significant in a way. It was quite strong. I agree with what Inchi is saying, that there was always an element of organized crime groups kind of, you know, moving heroin, you know, kind of leading some of the transition into heroin and then getting the heroin out of the country. But generally the situation in the country was very much sort of a localized affair in a way, right? But then that shift that happened, you know, about 10, 15 years ago or so toward the synthetic drug production really changed it as well, because in a way the ingredients that you need for synthetic drug production are very different from what you need for heroin production. You basically don't need the farmers, right? What you need is basically a secluded spot of land somewhere. You need a good chemist, and then you need access to chemicals, right? And then you need kind of someone to keep, you know, law enforcement or whoever might be on your back off your back in a way, right? And so that, I think, really shifted a little bit the way that organized crime groups kind of could feed into that production element and sort of really strengthen the role that they play compared to what we had seen in the previous decades.
So maybe I add on our concern and observation maybe in relating to the, you know, the linkage between the crimes for the drug production and or for the scamming business. So far, from our observation, we still not see the clear link between same criminal group to expand in that way. Right now, we observe closely on the west side, because, you know, for Shwe Koko and the KK Park, even though we found on the satellite some containers, but still, after we try to verify the types of the chemicals container there, at this moment, we still confirm that they still not yet to expand the business to the drug production yet. Not yet, yeah.
Dominic Fuller, Nick Asia. Very briefly, can you give us an update on the involvement of GTSEZ in Laos in drugs as a distribution hub? What do you know about it? And secondly, we're juggling all these numbers the whole time and trying to work out what's going on. But in the League, you talk about the criminality that's growing in the region. But in the League tables now, where do you think scamming, cybercrime, and narcotics, drugs rank? What's going on? What's the big picture comparatively?
What is
Kind of, yeah. Maybe I can say something about the second part, and maybe you want to say something about the special economic zone up in the Golden Triangle, and of course, Kunyim, please add to that. But in terms of ranking, I think it's quite difficult to, you know, to measure some of these things for obvious reasons, right? And I mean, you know, you see some figures up there, but I think we're also quite clear that, you know, when we're talking about seizures, you know, that allows us to kind of estimate in some ways, you know, what a market value might be, but at the end of the day, we're still talking about seizures. We're not, you know, kind of measuring all the stuff that is not seized in a way, right? There are other ways to go about that, and that's something that we're also doing, but that's not the kind of analysis that's gone into there. But if we're looking at sort of the different types of criminality, I think in 2019 we estimated the regional for East and Southeast Asia, the regional market for methamphetamine, and to be worth about $60 billion a year. That's probably been surpassed at this point, although at the same time as we've seen sort of production volumes go up, we're also seeing prices decline, so it's a bit difficult to say where the chips on that will fall, kind of. But then when we compare it to other types of criminality, it becomes even more complicated in some ways, because they're kind of targeting very different places. If we're looking at the drug trade coming out of the Golden Triangle, it's primarily focused on East and Southeast Asia and Oceania, Australia, some of the other countries in terms of markets. If we're looking, on the other hand, at the scam issue, we don't have that limitation of markets in a way. There's not a kind of an established supply route for scams as we have it for drugs. For drugs, it's kind of an established network in a way that feeds into these countries. And yes, there are changes. Inchik was talking about sort of it merging into, more drugs being shipped into India, sort of an expansion of the supply, and we're quite worried about that. But generally speaking, it's still, the trade is in a way limited by the need to carry a physical thing across borders. And it only makes sense to do it, so far in some ways, right? But when we're looking at the scam side, it's really something that's quite different. There's nothing that you actually need to move across the border. You can scam someone, as you very well know, from Miyawadi, for example, sitting in, and your target might be sitting in the US, it might be sitting in Japan, it might be sitting in Indonesia, it could be anywhere in the world, basically, as long as you know how to reach that person, right? So with that kind of, you open really a sort of a much bigger field of targets, if you want. And so if we're talking about the measurement, I think it's quite difficult to say which one is bigger, for example, right? But if we're looking at the potential, I do think that in terms of income, the scamming is probably the one that has the higher potential, simply because there is no limit to who you can reach, when you can reach, and how you can reach them. Do you want to talk something about special economic zone?
Yes, for the special economic zone, the Golden Triangle Special Economic Zone, I think back in the days there were cases directly linked to that area and some storage, whether involving the trafficking, facilitating. But these days, I think they are not really in that front. I think they are more act as our money laundering matters because of this ecosystem between these Myanmar armed groups across the Laos border, from the Golden Triangle SCG to those armed groups. They are directly connected. And the fact that they have these casinos, they have online casinos in presence, and they also have huge investment around the Golden Triangle Special Economic Zone. Many new medical parks are even building up in the Golden Triangle Special Economic Zone. So all in all, and some of the currency exchanges in some in areas of the Golden Triangle SCG, there is some clear linkage with those areas. So I think it is more for they act as more like money laundering and that elements in the overall drug supply and the money laundering chain.
Just if I can add to that, maybe specifically about the drug situation up there. We were talking briefly about sort of the how do you want to say, the amalgamation or the convergence between parts of Myanmar and parts of Laos, and I think that's something that we've been looking up at for quite some time. The Mekong there being quite a border that's relatively easy to use for trafficking of all kinds of things. And I think one place that we've always been quite concerned about in the past few years are the port facilities that are very part of the Golden Triangle Special Economic Zone in a way. And so from our perspective, that the port facilities there and some of the port facilities on the other side of the Mekong, whether it's up in Mongla or between those places, that's where we're quite concerned, and we see a lot of cross Mekong trafficking. And so from that perspective, I think the special economic zone and the infrastructure that's associated with it does play a quite significant role in that sort of bigger picture of Myanmar and Laos, especially Myanmar's border areas in Shan State and sort of northwestern Laos coming more closer together. So it is a crucial piece from that side.
Does anyone have any other questions? Oh. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. Very informational, and thank you in particular for talking a bit about Thailand's efforts to address the problem domestically. I think that's really encouraging. Sorry, my name is Dan Benowitz. I'm a Myanmar analyst. I am curious, cognizant of the fact that you're talking about most of this production in Myanmar being in Eastern Shan State, an area that hasn't been as much involved in the scam centers. How do you think the recent efforts of China and Thailand to put pressure on some of these criminal activities in northern Shan State and around the UNODC area may have affected the production and movement of drugs in Myanmar, whether by shaking up the relative power of criminal syndicates or changing modalities of how these activities take place, and if it's too early for the data to have sort of borne anything out yet, do you think it'll have any impact?
Okay. Okay. Actually, as a focal point, after my minister, the new Minister of Justice, came into power, the first country that we consider that we should go and push our policy forward is China, because China is the key player to change the situation as a whole. As you may say, the situation that you just raised, the incident of the triad fighting among each other, but once, based on our, intelligence, we have heard that, okay, some accident happened to the officers, covert officers of the China, and died, one died, just only one died. The Chinese, immediately took action, and then moved in. So it's a long history, and is another perspective is the is the influence zone of, and in that particular area they use Chinese money, and they also speak Chinese. So it's quite difficult that China will, even though we try to talk to them a lot of things, apart from chemical control, that after we push the agenda, and also US as well, they change immediately, they respond quite well. They, from the beginning until the end, they control quite well. But for the suppression, serious suppression on war group, so what we get the answer from China government, they said Thailand cannot just say war group. You must find, you need to give us the rigid and sufficient evidence for them to take action. Okay, in my personal view, I think it's so easy if they use the satellite to find out the illegal activity, happening there. But anyway, because that area very important for China, based on various theory, even the long history of the country itself, the political history, and also the economic, because the fight between the triad group over there, and after the China raid into the area, they can stop quickly, and then they can bargain about the economic benefits from the trade, easily. So for Thailand, the best we can do, actually Myanmar, we work closely together, and we can talk thoroughly on the situation. So for Myanmar side, Myanmar always said, we cannot solve the problem of drugs as long as we still have the problem of the insurgency group and the conflict between them and the minorities. As long as their political situation still not settled out, they cannot help much on the drug business. Even though they try, They help a lot. Recently, we quite sad that there was a tragic incident that the DED, the Drug Enforcement Department, raided into the Tachi Lake area, and they lost 6 lives for the armed group. So we always have the candid conversation. We exchange intelligence. We can cross easily between us. They try to do the best of their effort in the area that they have the control over it. So we have no doubt in the cooperation with the Myanmar government. But China, okay, sooner or later, because of the visit of the Prime Minister, the previous Prime Minister yesterday, the first issue he talked about, he said the Foreign Affairs of Thailand, okay, that I try to say what he said, yeah. He said, okay, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Thailand need to work more. They need to go to talk to the neighboring countries. So I got the message from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, MOFA, this morning to ask me about the agenda, what we can put to talk to Myanmar. So I said, okay, Myanmar might not be the first country that we would go. We would consider China first. Yeah.
Maybe if I can just add one point on sort of the question how the efforts that are ongoing on the scam center side relate to the drug situation. I think what we're currently seeing with regard to the cooperation between not just China and Thailand, but Thailand and quite a few other countries. I mean, a lot of the focus is really on the Myawaddy area, which as I think most people around here would know where that is, and that's not necessarily sort of the most active situation when it comes to drug production or drug trafficking, for that matter. I mean, there is some of it, and there might be some elements. There might be even tabletting going on in some of these places, but generally, when it comes to drug production, we're talking about slightly different areas. And I think from the Chinese perspective, as far as we can tell, I think a lot of the focus has been really about kind of securing their border in a way, and I think that kind of is reflected in sort of the seizure patterns that we're seeing in China. There's actually relatively limited seizures of drugs going into China or chemicals going the other way, as far as we can tell. Directly across the border with Myanmar, because I mean, I think around the COVID time, I think they built quite a few fences or structures there, and generally they've been putting quite a lot of focus on closing that border to the extent possible for these kind of goods, right? And so that's really, I mean, and in a way, ironically, now I think China is receiving more drugs, via the sea route from some of the routes that Inchi was talking about through the Gulf of Thailand, going all the way to the coastal area of Guangdong in a way. But of course, I think also China realizes that, yes, they can close the border as much as they want. They're never going to stop the whole issue. And I think that's where probably we're going to see a corollary of some of that expanded cooperation around transnational organized crime more broadly. Because at the end of the day, once you start talking about things like scam centers, you are also automatically going to talk about some of the other issues that the countries are facing. And so, I think these are some of the conversation that Kun Ying is also talking about, that they will take place in the same space one way or the other. But do we see that kind of congruence right now? Probably not.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Or from, sure, yes.
G'day guys, Tom from the UNODC WCO Interpol Passenger and Cargo Control Program. Having said that, not representing any acronyms today, this is just my personal opinion. I think Tony's bang on the money in terms of the Lao question. I mean, the conventional wisdom that that actors in Lao don't have the knowledge or the capability to produce methamphetamine or methamphetamine precursors en masse is just, I think we're seeing more and more that's less and less likely. But the reason I say that is I have a similar question for Sitakorn and for the panel. And by the way, great presentations, thank you so much. I look forward to reading the report in more detail. I have a similar question related to fentanyl. So, Kunsitakon, you mentioned that, you know, obviously we're all, after what's happened with the North American synthetic opioid crisis, that, and our American colleagues have been very enthusiastic that we are monitoring this situation very, very closely. But the question remains, I mean, you know, if in the Golden Triangle, you know, we know these groups are operating with nearly infinite resources, they're money laundering for the Latin American cartels, they're setting up these complex scam centers, you know, it can't be a question of resources. So my question is, why are they not producing fentanyl, tramadol, and other synthetic opioids in these parts of the Golden Triangle? Do you think that it's really a lack of access to experts, or is it some kind of agreement like, you know, the reason cocaine isn't produced anywhere outside of the Americas is because they're all terrified of the cartels and they have arrangements that, yeah, we'll supply but we won't produce? Or is there another explanation for why we don't see significant tramadol or fentanyl or nitazines or any other synthetic opioid production in the region? Thank you.
So, in my opinion, I think it depends on the market. Because right now, you got your own production nearby. Mexico is so easy. So why not, they need to import from far away. So this is I think, simple explanation. And also, because the market here, because just the meth tablet and ice and ketamine, they got benefits already. Yeah, and also I think the criminal group, they have their own specialties as well, and they don't overlap, because Mexico, they produce the drugs for those markets in particular, like that. And it depends on the types of drugs where they can find the market, they supply to the markets and find the cheapest way and easiest way and avoid the check from the law enforcement officers. I think simple as that.
If I just may add a little bit, the production itself is not taking place for sure. If there has been a production of fentanyl or anything else, yes, we will be able to see that. Similar to what our director Kuning said, the demand for this type of the opiate types of drugs in the region is not as significant. That's the first one, because the criminals make most money out of crystal meth by putting this crystal meth into Australia, Japan, Korea, and those countries that have a high price tag of drug. They make most money out of putting this crystal meth into these countries. Of course, they make more money, a lot of money from Yaba as well, but at the end, the most money coming out from this high-end drug from crystal meth and high prices. And there is no basically demand for these drugs at least for Korea and Japan. They don't really use these opiate type drugs. They all about stimulants. In Australia, there is a bit of market, but still much more limited compared to meth and cocaine. So I think that's the main reason. It doesn't mean that fentanyl types is not found in this region. We have seen it in several countries. That's why we are monitoring it. So hope it doesn't happen in this region.
Maybe I'll just add a few words, and maybe that's a good place to wrap it up, and because I know we've been keeping Kunying for a very long time, and all of you here. But just to say, I agree with both of them that I think, you know, there's almost no need to get into these different substances. You know, it's kind of inviting a lot of trouble for yourself in doing so when there's no need, because the meth trade works so well in a way. But one thing that I think we are very concerned, that the region should be very concerned about, and that I think, you know, the international community should be concerned about, is you know, the question of you know, whether or not some of the weaknesses that we were talking about in terms of chemical control, some of the sort of difficulties of understanding how chemicals are being sourced, how they're being traded, how that could feed into sort of more global supply chains for precursor chemicals for different type of drugs, and that could be for methamphetamine production elsewhere as much as it could be for synthetic opiate production, right? So that's definitely an area, and I think that's kind of the plea. That's where we're working very closely with our Thai friends, with some of the other countries in the region, to really get a better grip on the chemical trade and the problem of diversion of chemicals from the legal trade going into drug production. Because again, that's a real problem for the region. It's probably one of the few ways to actually dry out the production areas in the Golden Triangle. But at the same time, it also presents a significant risk at the more global level, and that's where a lot of the, I think, cooperation still needs to go into.
Okay. So thank you very much. As you mentioned, it's quite late already. So first of all, thank you very much to our panelists from UNODC, Mr. Benedict Hoffman, Mr. Inshik Shim, and also thank you very much to the Office of the Narcotics Control Board, Ms. Kavinvaddee, for joining us today at the launch of our report. The report is available online at the UNODC website, so if you would like to read the report in full, you can read it there, and we have some copies in the front of the room. I think. I don't know if they're still there. We still have some copies in the front of the room if you would like to have a hard copy with you. So thank you everyone for joining us, and I hope you have a great night. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me. Good work.